Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at an Arsenal Firearms Strike 1 Speed pistol. Now, this is a gun that has been in the United States since about late 2014, early 2015, under a couple of different brand names, company names, several different gun model names, several different importers. It's a really complicated, confusing commercial lineage. What I want to do today is focus on the mechanics and where the original design actually came from. And then we'll talk a little bit about why it's so complicated as to who's making and importing it today. So first off, the reason this is particularly interesting, because it kind of looks like every other modern polymer framed striker fired pistol, is that this is not a Browning tilting barrel system. This uses a design that its designers call AF Speedlock. That stands, by the way, for Arsenal Firearms Speedlock. And it's a vertically traveling locking block. So it's actually fairly reminiscent of a system like the Bergmann 1910, or perhaps even the Nambu Type 94. It's cool, and it's a system that allows the slide to be very thin, it allows the barrel axis to be very low to the hand, and as a result to shoot very flat. So that's the purported benefit to this system, and I think it's legit. Anyway, the design originates back in about 2012 with a partnership between a Russian guy named Dimitry Streshinskiy and an Italian by the name of Nicola Bandini. Now, Bandini has this connection to Arsenal Firearms, and you may recall at about the same time, early 2010s, Arsenal Firearms has released the AF 2011. It is the Siamese double 1911 that made a big splash, incredibly expensive gun, very impressive gun, lots of video on it. It seems really cool. It's actually pretty awful to shoot. It's just too big. But at the same time that it was being released, Arsenal Firearms was also working on the beginnings of this design. Now, I'm going to speculate a little bit here, and I'll try to be really clear in this video when I'm speculating and when I'm pretty confident in what I'm telling you. I'm going to speculate that the partnership with Streshinskiy came about because he had connections to Russian law enforcement. He was Russian, and had the idea that he should develop, that the pair, Bandini and Streshinskiy, should develop a pistol to replace the Makarov in Russian police service. That would be a tremendously profitable product to have. There were a gajillion Makarovs in service. They clearly needed to be replaced. And so this gun is developed specifically for the Russian police market. And it does really well. There's an official picture that was taken with then President of Russia, Medvedev, shooting one of these. It first got really public notice in 2013 when Larry Vickers did a video in Russia of a Russian counterterror group confidence drill, which is a kind of bonkers video on its own, but they happen to be using early versions of the Strizh, yet a different name for this thing, but the same gun. And people hadn't seen the gun before. It's like, ooh, what is that? Well, it's going through testing really effectively until early 2014, when apparently what happened was officials with the Russian police, expecting that this is the gun that's going to pass all of their trials and be adopted, they come to Streshinskiy and say, basically, we'd love to have your gun, but it's going to take a little extra something for it to pass the trials, a little something in the hand, if you know what I mean. This is Russia, so this shouldn't be a huge surprise. Streshinskiy apparently replies that, like, well, we can arrange something, but this means, like, you're guaranteeing that my pistol's going to win the trial if I, pay you off with large amounts of money, right? And they go, well, no, I mean, maybe, sure. That's not very confidence-inspiring. TLDR Streshinskiy leaves Russia never to return, and the pistol disappears. Poof, gone. He opted not to bribe the Russian officialdom. They opted to threaten to arrest him, apparently, and he bailed on Russia, never to return. At that point, there is a pivot of, okay, how about we release this on the international commercial market? It's a good pistol. It is legitimately a good pistol. And that's when we see it come into the United States in late 2014 or early 2015. Now, at that point, it's being manufactured by Arsenal Firearms in Italy. And comes into the US, and that's where it starts to make a splash. Now, at some point in this story, this is another place where I'm being a little speculative here. I think there was a breakup, some sort of problem between the two partners, Bandini and Streshinskiy, because today this same design is being manufactured by two different companies. Arsenal Firearms is making it in Italy. That's the one we have here. And then it was also being manufactured under the name Archon in Germany, Hungary, and or now the Czech Republic. And I'm pretty sure, again, speculation here, I'm pretty sure what happened is they both partners have the legal right to manufacture this pistol. They both have the rights to the relevant patents. They can't, neither one of them can stop the other from making it, but that's why they're both being made simultaneously, is the partnership is now two separate individuals and companies. Because otherwise it really wouldn't make sense for these two companies are essentially both competing against each other. They're making slightly different versions of the gun, but there's no good reason for two separate companies to make the same IP like this. Pretty sure it was a breakup in the partnership. They haven't talked about it. I can't find any actual reference to this anywhere, but I'm pretty sure that must be what has happened. So both companies have also gone through a couple of different US importers. The current importer for this one is American Precision Firearms out of Miami. They don't have a lot of media, like there's a lot of people importing pistols. That's who's importing this at the moment. The Archon is at the moment, I believe, being imported by PTR. So definitely bigger name than American Precision Firearms, which basically nobody's heard of. But there are different versions of the pistols being made by both companies. Arsenal here has like 6 different variations you can get, from the most basic to this is sort of the middle ground one. It's $1,000, $1,200 pistol, and it goes all the way up to the Ergal model, which instead of a polymer frame has a solid aluminum machined frame, and it's like $6,000. It's really insanely expensive. But you've got all sorts of different options for them. So that's pretty much the background here, I think. Now, let's go ahead and take this apart, because really, to me, it's the mechanics of this that make it particularly interesting. So this version is set up as a competition pistol. It's a large frame, full-size gun, not really intended for carry. We have a 17-round magazine here. You got witness holes, there you go, on the side. It comes with what is really a quite nice fiber optic front sight, a relatively narrow rear notch there, fully adjustable. There are versions of this that come set up for optics, but this isn't one of them. You can see the Italian manufacturing mark. We have CIP, European proofs, mark of the importer, the designation of this one, Strike 1 Speed. Speed is the variation. There are a number of other variation names. APF, again, the American importer. It doesn't say Arsenal Firearms here, but that AF is Arsenal Firearms, and this is the same logo that you would see on guns like that Double 1911. That is the Italian company's logo. I believe there were legal issues with the name Arsenal Firearms in the United States, which is already being used by a Bulgarian AK company, which also has Arsenal USA, and there definitely was some confusion about that nomenclature back earlier when these first came in. For controls, again, this competition pistol, not really meant for carry. We have a relatively large magazine release. It's not ambidextrous, but it can be swapped left to right side. There is no manual safety, nor is there well, there is a trigger safety, but it's not the standard sort of little lever in the center. Instead, the safety here is that you have to pivot the trigger back before you can pull it. And it's, by the way, a really nice trigger. With a pretty, like for a striker fired gun, this is pretty darn good. Now, the way this actually functions as a safety is if you don't pivot it, so that's the pivot, if you just try to push it straight back, it's locked and it won't go back. So if the gun is dropped, there's not enough inertia to actually pivot it this way against its return spring, and so the trigger can't go off. This is the exact same physics concept as the internal little lever. It's just executed a little bit differently, and frankly, I think it's fine. It works well. If we look at the action here, you can see that as the slide begins to reciprocate, it's locked with the barrel, but it just slides directly backwards until it stops, and then the slide opens up. So not a tilting barrel system. The designers say that they developed this independently, and I'm inclined to believe them, but that doesn't mean they're the first people to do it. The vertically traveling block has been around for a little over 100 years with the Bergmann system. What you see here, right here, is the locking block. So same deal, as this goes backwards, that locking block is cammed down. Once it's fully down, then the bolt can separate from the slide. So if I just go to pull the slide back by itself, you'll see the first bit of travel, right? It's a little hard to demonstrate. The first bit of travel right there, before this locking block is all the way dropped, the bolt and the slide up there are locked together, and only then does it separate. So Bergmann did this. This is the 1910 pattern Bergmann, but it exists on a few earlier models. And the Type 94 Nambu has a similar vertically dropping block system. So on this one, you can actually see the locking lug here through the side. And as I push the barrel back, you can see that lug drop. Here it pivots a little bit more than it's vertical, but once again, the barrel, which is, by the way, that's a sleeve over the barrel. The barrel travels directly backwards and does not tilt like a Browning. All right, so the way this is implemented here on the Strike 1, for disassembly, it is empty. You do have to pull the trigger first. We'll do that. Then pull the slide back just a little bit and push in on this cross pin. Pull it all the way out. It is captive. And then you can pull the slide just a bit forward and off the frame. Now we can pull our captive recoil spring off. That's nice. And then we get, voila, the locking block and the barrel. So the way this works is really quite simple. We have locking lugs here on the side of this locking block. They are going to lock into the barrel here. So you can see that when this lug is in the, well, technically this would be the downward position, it will allow the slide to move. When it's in the upward position, it's locked together. So the barrel's always locked to this thing. We then have a cam track cut in it. That takedown pin actually is living in that cam. So when this is assembled, it's actually going to be like this. And as this locking block goes forward and back, it lifts up and down at the same time. So there you go, the barrel's locked together. Once this lug is pulled down by that cam to just the right point, which is right there, then it unlocks and the slide is able to pull an empty cartridge off. It's a clever system and it's very space efficient. Now they did a couple other things to keep the whole gun really short in this top to bottom dimension. If we look back here, this is our striker and it's got this sort of odd triangular release on it, sear on it. So it's spring loaded right like that. And the top of the frame has a triangular piece here that matches. So normally on a striker fired gun, when you pull the trigger, it's got a striker release or a striker catch that's going to drop down, which releases the striker to snap forward. In this case, pulling it inside does the same thing. The striker is caught on the flat section right back here. When this pulls off to the left, it allows the striker to go snapping forward. So it does the same thing, but it does it with a lot less vertical material. Now, on a Browning tilting barrel system, having the striker release go down doesn't matter because you already have to have that space so that the barrel has space to drop down into. On this design, because you don't need any vertical dropping space for the barrel, you want to come up with a system like this to really exploit that shortness. Same thing, by the way, the ejector right here is set at a 45-degree angle so that it is vertically a little bit shorter as well. I'm not sure I like that. There are a number of elements on here that seem to me to be a little bit on the fragile side, and that unconnected piece right there is one of them. But I'll go ahead and remove the striker so you can see that as well. We've got the rear plate here. That is a spring-loaded pin that I have to push in. Once that's in, I can start pulling this plate down. And by the way, these parts have quite a lot of spring behind them, so hold them in place when you pull this plate off, or they will go flying across the room. There we go. All right, so there's one spring. There's the other. This is actually the extractor spring. I can now pull out, this is a very complicated striker system. That's the actual firing pin, the head of the striker. We've got a little return spring in it there, and then it actually interfaces with this rather finicky little tube, holds the striker spring like that. Then these two little tabs right there and right there interface. So this is putting spring pressure on the striker. That little triangular section is holding against that right there. So that's what holds it forward, or holds it rearward, until you pull the trigger, which pushes that out to the side, which releases this, at which point the hook on the back of this tube is pulling on this little protrusion here, and that pulls the striker forward. So a lot of kind of fiddly little complicated parts in here to make the striker system work. By the way, once we've taken out the ejector, the extractor spring and tube, the extractor itself will just drop out. And that spring is sitting right there. So this tube is putting tension on the extractor. When this is assembled, this spring is completely compressed inside that tube, so it actually sits like that, and this tube holds the extractor from coming out of the gun. Sorry, I misplaced this little guy. So this is actually on the end of the spring. This is compressed all the way down in there. This doesn't go all the way into the tube, but it compresses down like that. And then this little guy is sitting on the base of the extractor right there. So there's one other internal safety mechanism here, and it's this little guy that pivots like so. And if this isn't pushed inward, there's a little block right there that's going to prevent the striker from going all the way forward, like that. Notice striker's not protruding out through the breech face. What'll happen when you pull the trigger, this little shark fin right there is going to deactivate that safety. So it's going backwards. What it's doing is hitting that little angle, pulling this, pushing this off to the side, which thus allows the firing pin to go all the way forward, present through the breech face, and actually fire the pistol. So this is what ensures that if you haven't pulled the trigger, even if you drop the gun hard enough somehow to overcome the firing pin spring pressure in here, it can't actually go all the way forward, including, for example, if this little tab breaks, or actually it wouldn't be that one, if this little triangular tab breaks and the sear no longer holds the striker back, it just like breaks off, and this goes flying forward under spring pressure. If you haven't pulled the trigger, this safety will stop the striker right there and the gun won't fire. So this is the modern sort of internal automatic safeties that basically, in some form, all of our modern pistols have today. Whew, all right, that's a lot of little fiddly bits to take a look at. Now, I'm gonna put this back together and we're gonna head out to the range with it. I figured we'd start with just some generic MagTech, 115 grain, see how that runs, and then run it with, I also brought out some hot Winchester 124 grain service ammo. First shot's downrange. One little hiccup there. Another little hiccup there. It's pleasant to shoot. It doesn't climb that much. It's 2 feed hiccups on the first mag are not super awesome, but it may be the sort of thing that wears itself in.
I am able to get a nice hold on this so that when it just comes naturally out of recoil, my front sight's right back on the target. And that's not bad. This has a high cut grip, has a low bore axis. That's all good stuff. And the second magazine did run flawlessly. So I'm gonna throw in some hot Winchester ammo and let's see how it handles, how it feels with that. All right, we'll give some of this a try. It feels a little bit snappier, but not bad. The recoil doesn't seem to be noticeably worse. The climb doesn't seem to be noticeably worse. Like it's still coming, the front sight's still coming down onto target pretty well for me. Not bad. And I still have a few left in there. I was also a little concerned, would this thing give us feed issues? You can see this is a truncated cone sort of projectile, but the magazine's running it just fine. Magazine relief is a little bit frictiony in there. All right, got a few rounds left. Let's go ahead and put a group on paper, which frankly doesn't mean that much with me doing the shooting. We've got a paper target here anyway, so we might as well do it. All right, all empty, no mouths at all. So that's two minor hiccups in the first mag. The rest, everything ran smoothly. Pending shooting a bunch more through it, I'm certainly willing to chalk that up to just a little bit of initial break-in. And that's at 15 paces. So, yeah. Absolutely a better shooter can do better than that, but it's perfectly suitable for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed a look at the Strike One and its cool and unorthodox operating system. Thanks for watching.